If the Brain Was an App podcast, episode 6, The Electrical Language of Life. Hello, and welcome to If the Brain Was an App, the expanded interface of this place called Earth series, exploring perception, programming, and the hidden architecture of the human mind. In the last episode, we explored how the brain simplifies reality into labels, categories, and divisions. We looked at the myth of the divided brain, the way simple labels become identity shortcuts, and how phrases like "I'm logical," "you're emotional," "that's irrational" can reduce a living system into something easier to judge but harder to truly understand. You are not just thinking, you are signaling. In this episode, we move beneath those labels, beneath logic and emotion, beneath thought and behavior, beneath identity, belief, argument, and reaction. We move into the signal system itself, the electrical, chemical, rhythmic, and regulatory language of life. Because before a thought becomes a sentence, before an emotion becomes a story, before behavior becomes visible, the body and brain are already signaling. Cells are communicating, neurons are firing, chemical messengers are moving, the nervous system is adjusting. Breath, heart rhythm, hormone activity, muscle tone, attention, alertness, fatigue, hunger, light, sound, timing, and environment are all participating in the state you call me. This is where the episode begins, with the recognition that you are not only a thinking being, you are a signaling system trying to stay coherent. Most people think of the brain as though it is mainly a container for thoughts, a kind of internal screen where ideas appear. Memories are stored, decisions are made, and identity is maintained. But the brain is not only a thinking organ, it is a communication field. It is constantly sending, receiving, filtering, amplifying, dampening, predicting, correcting, and coordinating signals across the body. It does not merely create ideas, it regulates a living organism. And that means what you think is never fully separate from how your system is signaling. A thought may feel like a clean mental event, but it often emerges from a deeper state. The same situation can produce a different thought depending on whether you are rested or exhausted, fed or hungry, calm or threatened, connected or isolated, overstimulated or grounded. The same sentence can land differently depending on the chemistry of the moment. The same memory can feel manageable or unbearable, depending on the nervous system receiving it. The same problem can look solvable in the morning and impossible at midnight. That is not because the truth has necessarily changed. It is because the signal environment has changed. This is one of the most important shifts in this part of the series. If part 1 was about the interface, perception, prediction, categories, identity, and constructed reality, part 2 begins by asking what the interface is made of. What is moving beneath thought? What makes one state feel clear and another feel chaotic? What allows attention to stabilize or fragment? What makes perception widen or narrow? What makes emotion rise, collapse, intensify, soften, or repeat? The answer is not one thing. It is not simply dopamine, serotonin, stress, or chemistry in a simple mechanical sense. The living system is more relational than that. It is electrical activity, chemical transmission, timing, rhythm, bodily condition, environment, social contact, sensory input, memory, expectation, and behavior all interacting. A human state is not a single switch. It is an ecology of signals. This is why reduction can become misleading. People often talk about the brain as if one chemical equals one feeling. Dopamine equals pleasure, serotonin equals happiness, oxytocin equals love, cortisol equals stress, but the reality is more layered. These systems do not work in isolation. They work through context, timing, receptor sensitivity, feedback loops, body state, environment, and meaning. A chemical signal does not exist as a floating emotion. It participates in a whole system. That whole system is constantly being shaped. Sleep shapes it. Food shapes it. Movement shapes it. Light shapes it. Breath shapes it. Stress shapes it. Screens shape it. Language shapes it. Music shapes it. Conflict shapes it. Silence shapes it. Social belonging shapes it. Repetition shapes it. The pace of your day shapes it. The way someone speaks to you shapes it. The way you speak to yourself shapes it. This is where the electrical language of life becomes personal, because the brain does not simply think in words. It speaks in electricity, chemistry, rhythm, and state. You can feel this without needing to understand the full biology. Think about how music can shift you. A song can change posture, mood, memory, energy, movement, and emotional access within seconds. Nothing in your external life may have changed, yet your internal state reorganizes. Rhythm enters the body. The signal changes. Meaning follows. Or think about sleep deprivation. After a poor night's sleep, the world can look different. People may seem more irritating. Problems may feel heavier. Your tolerance may be lower. Your attention may scatter. A task that felt manageable yesterday may feel overwhelming today. Again, the world has not necessarily changed in proportion to the feeling. The system receiving the world has changed. Or think about technology. You pick up your phone for a minute and leave 20 minutes later with a different nervous system. Notifications, messages, conflict, comparison, novelty, outrage, humor, advertising, headlines, social cues, and rapid visual movement all enter the field. The body may be sitting still, but the signal system is being pulled in several directions. Attention fragments. Urgency rises. The mind begins to jump. The state shifts. And after that, you may not simply return to the same clarity you had before. This is why signal disruption matters. Modern life not only gives us information, it alters the signal conditions through which information is received. If attention is fragmented, reality is received differently. If the nervous system is overstimulated, small things can feel bigger. If the body is chronically stressed, ambiguity can feel threatening. If the system is constantly interrupted, deeper thought becomes harder to access. If the rhythms of sleep, breath, movement, and silence are disturbed, the mind may begin to feel noisy before a single problem is named. This is why someone can wake up already feeling behind, already tense, already distracted, already uneasy, without one clear reason. There may be no single dramatic event, but the system may still be carrying accumulated signal disruption. Too little sleep, too much screen light, too many fragments, too many unresolved interactions, too much noise, too much pace, too many emotional spikes, too little stillness, too little rhythm, and then the mind creates a story. I'm failing, I'm anxious, I can't cope, something is wrong, I need to fix my life, people are irritating me, I'm not myself today. Sometimes the story may contain truth, but sometimes the story is the conscious surface of a deeper signal environment. The body shifted first, the chemistry shifted, the rhythm shifted, the attention shifted. Then the mind tried to explain the state. This is the hidden doorway in episode 6. What if some of the stories we believe about ourselves begin after the signal has already changed? What if the first question is not always, what am I thinking? But what is my system signaling? What if the mood is not random, the reaction is not isolated, and the fog is not simply personal weakness, but evidence that the communication field has become disrupted? This matters because once you understand yourself as a signaling system, you stop treating every thought as a final truth. You begin to ask better questions. What happened before this state arrived? Did my rhythm change? Did my breath change? Did I eat? Did I sleep? Did I scroll? Did I absorb conflict? Did I move my body? Did I receive light? Did I sit in silence? Did I speak to someone who regulated me or dysregulated me? Did I spend the morning in artificial urgency? These questions bring compassion and precision. They do not excuse everything. They do not remove responsibility, but they give the system a more accurate map. Instead of fighting thoughts at the surface, we begin to understand the signaling conditions beneath them. This is also where the wider work around language and the nervous system becomes important. Words are not only about meanings. Tone is not only style. Rhythm is not only decoration. The way language is delivered can regulate or dysregulate the listener. A rushed voice can create urgency. A soft rhythm can invite settling. A sharp phrase can tighten the... You cannot separate the mind from the conditions that keep signaling into it. A brain living in chaos will often produce chaotic thoughts. A body living in threat will often produce threat-based perception. A nervous system living in constant interruption may struggle to access depth. A person living inside emotional noise may begin to mistake noise for personality. But the reverse is also true. When rhythm returns, clarity may return. When breath deepens, perception may widen. When sleep stabilizes, thought may become less catastrophic. When language softens, the body may listen differently. When technology is reduced, attention may begin to gather again. When the signal environment becomes more coherent, the story may change without force. That is the promise of this episode. Not that we can perfectly control our brain chemistry. Not that life can be reduced to biological management. Not that every problem disappears if we regulate better. But that awareness grows when we learn to read the signal before the story. When we ask what has changed in the system before we over-identify with the state. When we stop treating the mind as a detached narrator and begin recognizing it as part of a living, electrical, chemical, rhythmic field. You are not only thoughts moving through a mind. You are electricity, chemistry, rhythm, breath, timing, sensation, signal. The more you learn to read the signal, the less you have to be ruled by the story that arrives afterwards. Part 2 Anchor Concept, Neurochemistry and the Brain's Signal System. The anchor concept for this episode is that the brain communicates through electrical impulses and chemical messengers. But even that sentence can sound too mechanical if we are not careful. It can make the brain sound like a circuit board with chemicals poured over it, or a machine with switches being turned on and off. The reality is more alive than that. The brain is not only firing signals. It coordinates a living organism. It is constantly adjusting the relationship between body, environment, memory, attention, perception, movement, mood, and behavior. So when we speak about neurochemistry, we are not speaking about isolated chemicals floating around creating isolated feelings. We are speaking about a dynamic signaling language, a language of electricity, chemistry, timing, intensity, rhythm, feedback, and context. This is one of the biggest shifts in understanding the brain. The brain is not simply a storage device for thoughts. It is not only a processor. It is not only a symbolic system. It is a living communication system. It takes in signals from the world, signals from the body, signals from memory, signals from social contact, signals from light, sound, movement, food, sleep, stress, and language, and it constantly tries to organize those signals into a usable state. That state then becomes the ground from which thought emerges. This is why the same person can feel like a different person in different conditions. After good sleep, food, sunlight, movement, and calm connection, the mind may feel wider. Problems may feel workable. Emotions may feel more controllable. Thoughts may have more space around them. But after poor sleep, overstimulation, conflict, too much screen time, hunger, pressure, and emotional overload, the same mind may become sharp, foggy, reactive, fearful, impatient, or heavy. The person has not become a different self in any absolute sense. The signal environment has changed. At the center of this is the neuron. Neurons are often described as brain cells that send messages, and that is true, but it is worth slowing down and feeling the meaning of that. A neuron does not think in words. It is not forming sentences. It is responding to changes in electrical charge, chemical conditions, incoming signals, and thresholds of activation. It receives inputs. It integrates them. If enough activation builds, it fires. That firing travels along the neuron as an electrical event, and when it reaches the synapse, it influences the release of chemical messengers that help communicate with the next cell. So even before meaning appears, there is a pattern. There is activation, there is transmission, there is a signal. A thought may later arrive as I feel anxious, or I need to respond, or I cannot focus, or I feel inspired, but underneath that thought is a whole field of electrical and chemical activity. Signals have already been moving, networks have already been activated, the body has already been included. The mind arrives after a process that is already alive. This is why the phrase signal before story matters. Very often, the story we tell about our state begins after the system has already shifted. The body tightens, then the mind looks for a reason. The chemistry changes, then the thought tries to explain it. Attention fragments, then the self-narrative begins. The state arrives, and then the story says, this is who I am today. But it may not be who you are. It may be the signal environment you are currently inside. Neurochemistry helps us understand this. Chemical messengers such as dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline, acetylcholine, glutamate, GABA, oxytocin, endorphins, cortisol, and many others participate in mood, attention, motivation, alertness, learning, memory, bonding, pain, stress, inhibition, reward, and regulation. But the mistake is to reduce these chemicals to simple slogans. Dopamine is not just pleasure. Serotonin is not just happiness. Oxytocin is not just love. Cortisol is not just stress. These signals participate in wider loops. Their meaning depends on context, timing, location, receptor activity, body state, and what the organism is trying to do. A chemical does not mean one thing everywhere. Dopamine, for example, is often talked about as the pleasure chemical. But that is too simple. Dopamine is deeply involved in motivation, reward prediction, learning, seeking, salience, and the movement towards something. It is not only the feeling of pleasure after a reward, it is also the anticipation, the wanting, the pull, that maybe there is something here. This is why novelty can become so compelling. This is why scrolling can become repetitive, even when it is not truly satisfying. The system is not necessarily receiving deep nourishment. It may be caught in seeking. That difference matters. Pleasure is not the same as compulsion. Reward is not the same as fulfillment. Stimulation is not the same as regulation. This will become even more important in episode 7, but it begins here. Neurochemistry is not a set of pleasure buttons. It is part of how the organism learns what matters, what to pursue, what to repeat, what to avoid, what to remember, and what to treat as significant. Noradrenaline, often associated with alertness and arousal, can sharpen attention when balanced, but in excess, it can make the system feel urgent, vigilant, restless, or threat-oriented. A little activation can help focus. Too much activation can make everything feel important, loud, or dangerous. This is why stress does not simply make you feel bad. It changes what your brain treats as relevant. It changes the signal-to-noise ratio. It can make the mind scan for problems, become sensitive to tone, jump to conclusions, and treat uncertainty as a demand for immediate action. GABA and glutamate show another kind of balance. Glutamate is the main excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain, helping signals activate and move. GABA is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter, helping dampen activity and prevent runaway excitation. Life depends on both. Too much excitation without enough inhibition, and the system becomes noisy, restless, overwhelmed, or unstable. Too much inhibition or dampening, and the system may become flat, slowed, foggy, or disconnected. So clarity is not simply more activation. It is balance. It is rhythm. It is the right signal at the right time, in the right amount, in the right network. This is the deeper point. The brain depends on coordination, not just signal strength. Modern culture often pushes us towards more stimulation, more content, more speed, more productivity, more novelty, more reaction, more information. But the nervous system does not only need more. It needs timing. It needs spacing. It needs recovery. It needs rhythm. It needs enough signal to engage and enough quiet to integrate. A brain that is constantly stimulated may not become more conscious. It may become more fragmented. This is why timing is central to the electrical language of life. Electrical activity in the brain is rhythmic. Neural networks do not simply fire randomly. They coordinate through patterns and oscillations. Different states of attention, sleep, relaxation, focus, and emotional activation involve different rhythms and patterns of activity. The body also runs on rhythm, breath rhythm, heart rhythm, circadian rhythm, digestive rhythm, hormonal rhythm, movement rhythm, social rhythm, and speech rhythm. Human coherence depends on timing. When timing is disrupted, the whole system can feel off. After jet lag, poor sleep, overstimulation, or chronic stress, the person may not be able to name exactly what is wrong, but something in the timing has changed. The body is awake when it should be resting. The mind is active when it should be settling. Attention jumps when it should deepen. Emotion rises when there is not enough capacity to metabolize it. The rhythm of the system has been disturbed. This is why sleep is not just rest. Sleep is signal restoration. It helps regulate memory, emotion, immune function, metabolism, attention, and nervous system balance. When sleep is disrupted, perception is disrupted. Emotional regulation becomes harder. Threat sensitivity can increase. Irritability can rise. The mind becomes more vulnerable to negative loops. It becomes harder to hold complexity. The system is not simply tired. It is signaling differently. Food is similar. The brain is metabolically expensive. It needs energy. Blood sugar shifts, nutrient availability, gut signals, inflammation, hydration, and digestion all influence the state. Hunger can become irritation. Poor nutrition can lead to foggy thinking. Heavy or unstable eating patterns can alter energy and attention. This does not mean every emotional state is reducible to food, but it does mean the body is part of the signal system. You cannot separate perception from physiology. Movement also speaks into the system. Movement changes circulation, muscle tone, proprioception, mood, attention, and autonomic state. Sometimes the mind cannot think its way out of a state because the state is being held bodily. A walk, stretching, breath, posture change, or physical release can shift the signal environment enough that new thoughts become available. Again, this is not magic. It is system communication. The brain listens to the body. This is where the old idea of the brain as commander becomes too limited. The brain is not simply giving orders to the body. The body is continuously sending information back. Interoception, the sensing of internal bodily state, informs mood, emotion, self-awareness, threat detection, and decision-making. Heartbeat, breath, gut sensations, muscle tension, temperature, pain, fatigue, hunger, hormonal shifts. All of these become part of the field from which the brain constructs experience. So when someone says, "I don't know why I feel this way," it may be because the story has not yet caught up with the signals. The body may be tired. The gut may be unsettled. The breath may be shallow. The heart rate may be elevated. The system may be carrying unresolved activation. The mind then receives that internal field and begins trying to explain it. This is why emotional awareness is often bodily awareness first. Before I'm anxious, there may be chest tightness, stomach movement, shoulder tension, shallow breath scanning, pressure behind the eyes, or a sense of urgency. Before I am angry, there may be heat, jaw tension, forward energy, hand pressure, increased volume, or a need to act. Before I am sad, there may be heaviness, slowing, collapse, ache, tiredness, or withdrawal. The named emotion is often the later translation of a signal pattern already underway, and that translation can be wrong. A body state can be interpreted in different ways depending on context. A racing heart might be fear, excitement, attraction, exertion, caffeine, anticipation, or old activation. The sensation is real, but the story attached to it can vary. This is why awareness has to ask not only, what am I feeling, but how am I interpreting the signal? This is where neurochemistry meets perception. The internal signal environment influences what the brain notices and what meaning it attaches to what it notices. Under stress, threat cues become more visible. Under calm connection, relational cues may be easier to receive. Under fatigue, complexity can feel intolerable. Under overstimulation, silence can feel uncomfortable because the system has become used to constant input. Under chronic urgency, rest can feel unsafe because the body has learned to equate stillness with vulnerability. The brain is always interpreting from a state. This also makes social connection central. Human beings regulate through each other. Voice, facial expression, timing, posture, proximity, touch, rhythm, and attention can all influence state. A calm person can help settle a room. A dysregulated person can activate it. A harsh tone can tighten the body before the words are processed. A warm tone can create enough safety for difficult content to be heard. This is not merely psychological. It is signaling. A conversation is not only an exchange of meanings, it is an exchange of nervous system cues. This ties directly to the wider work around mirror-linguistic hypothesis and nervous system language. Language is not only representational, it is regulatory. Tone, pacing, implication, repetition, pauses, emotional charge, and rhythm enter the body as signals. A sentence can open or close the field depending on how it lands. A repeated phrase can train expectation. A certain rhythm can soothe or unsettle. An accusation can mobilize a defense before the content is examined. A careful reflection can create space for the system to update. Words ride on a signal. That is why content alone is never the whole message. The same phrase can land differently depending on tone, timing, relationship, context, and state. We need to talk can feel loving, neutral, threatening, controlling, or supportive, depending on the signal field around it. The words are the surface. The nervous system reads more than words. This is also why technology matters so deeply in episode 6. Technology does not merely provide content, it creates signal conditions. Notifications interrupt timing, endless scrolling trains seeking, rapid cuts fragment attention, blue light alters circadian cues, algorithmic feeds deliver emotional spikes, social metrics turn belonging into visible numbers, news cycles create an anticipatory threat, short-form content trains the brain towards novelty and away from sustained depth. The body may be sitting on a sofa, but the nervous system may be in a storm of signals. The disruption is often subtle. People may not connect the state to the input. They may think, I'm anxious today, without noticing the morning began with notifications, comparison, urgency, headlines, arguments, and rapid context switching. They may think, I can't focus, without noticing they have trained the signal system through constant interruption. They may think, I'm angry, without noticing they have been feeding the nervous system outrage in small doses all day. This is not about blaming technology as though it is all bad. Technology can connect, inform, teach, support, and create. The issue is rhythm, dosage, timing, context. The issue is whether the signal environment serves coherence or fragments it. A tool becomes a problem when it begins training the system away from regulation. This is why the anchor concept of neurochemistry has to be approached carefully. We do not want to reduce ourselves to just being chemicals. We also do not want to float above biology as though thought is independent of signal. The human being is not a machine, but neither is the mind detached from physiology. We are embodied, signaling relational organisms. Neurochemistry does not erase meaning, it helps carry meaning. A grief state has chemistry, but grief is not just chemicals. Love has chemistry, but love is not just oxytocin. Motivation has dopamine involved, but purpose is not just dopamine. Stress has cortisol and adrenaline involved, but stress is not just hormones. Biological language should deepen understanding, not flatten experience. That distinction matters. Because when people reduce everything to chemicals, they can lose the human field. They may treat sadness as a malfunction, attention as merely a dopamine issue, love as chemistry, spirituality as brain activity, or anxiety as a chemical imbalance. There may be biological processes involved, but the meaning of a state includes story, context, relationship, memory, environment, and life circumstance. At the same time, when people ignore chemistry entirely, they may blame themselves for states that are partly physiological. They may moralize fatigue. They may shame themselves for fog. They may call themselves weak when their system is exhausted. They may call themselves broken when their rhythms are disrupted. They may try to think their way through a signal problem that requires rest, nourishment, movement, connection, or reduced input. Both extremes are incomplete. The more integrated view says biology matters, meaning matters, context matters, behavior matters, environment matters, and awareness matters. The state is a living intersection. This is why regulation is not simply calming down. Regulation is signal coherence. It is the system finding a rhythm where information can move without overwhelming the organism. It is the ability to activate when needed and settle when possible, to focus when required and rest when appropriate, to feel without flooding, to think without dissociating, to respond without being hijacked, to receive signals without turning every signal into a crisis. Regulation is not the absence of intensity. It is the ability to stay in a relationship with intensity. The brain's signal system is central to that. When signals are coordinated, the person may experience clarity, flexibility, presence, and grounded attention. When signals are disrupted, the person may experience urgency, noise, fragmentation, impulsivity, fatigue, irritability, fog, or emotional volatility. This gives us a different way to approach ourselves. Instead of asking only, what is wrong with me, we can ask, what is happening in the signal system? Instead of asking only, why am I thinking this, we can ask, what state is this thought emerging from? Instead of arguing with every story, we can ask whether the conditions beneath the story have changed. Did I sleep? Have I eaten? Have I moved? Have I been overstimulated? Have I been isolated? Have I been exposed to conflict? Have I been inside too much artificial urgency? Has my breath changed? Has my rhythm been interrupted? And has my body been carrying tension I have not listened to? These questions do not solve everything, but they restore contact with the living system within ourselves. This is the anchor of episode 6. The brain communicates through electrical impulses and chemical messengers, but those signals do not operate in isolation. They exist inside a whole ecology of body, environment, relationship, language, rhythm, and meaning. Mood, attention, memory, perception, and behavior are shaped by signal conditions. The mind is not floating above the body, it is emerging through it. So the key line is this: the brain does not simply think in words. It speaks in electricity, chemistry, rhythm, and state. If we want to understand ourselves more clearly, we have to learn to listen at that level. Not to reduce ourselves, but to hear the language that was spoken before the story began. Part 3. The hidden layer. The hidden layer in this episode is that the story often arrives after the signal has already changed. We tend to believe the conscious explanation comes first. We think something happens, then we understand it, then we feel something about it. But very often, the sequence is different. The body shifts before the mind explains it. The nervous system receives something before language has organized it. Mood changes before a clear thought appears. Perception alters because the internal signal environment has changed, and only afterwards does the mind begin building a story around what has already moved through the system. This is where the signal before the story becomes important. A person may wake up with heaviness in the body before they know why the day feels difficult. They may enter a room and feel a contraction before they have consciously identified what feels wrong. They may hear a tone in someone's voice and feel something tighten before they can explain what was detected. They may feel unease, sadness, irritation, longing, excitement, or dread before any clear narrative has formed. The body has already registered a shift. The story comes later. Because the story comes later, it can sometimes be wrong. The mind may say, I'm just tired, when the body is actually carrying grief. It may say, that person is annoying me, when the deeper signal is shame, fear, or a boundary being crossed. It may say, something is wrong with me, when the signal environment is actually overloaded. It may say, this is irrational, when what is really happening is that the body is holding information that has not yet become conscious language. That is why the hidden layer matters. Some things are perceived through the nervous system before they are understood through cognition. This does not mean every bodily sensation is automatically true in the literal sense. It does not mean every feeling should become a belief. But it does mean that the body may be participating in perception in ways the conscious mind has not yet learned to respect. The body may detect incongruence before the mind can describe it. It may sense pressure, mismatch, dishonesty, emotional absence, relational tension, or internal conflict before a clear explanation is available. The signal arrives, but the story lags. I can relate this to my own experience, especially around what I would describe as realizations and spiritual awakening. Looking back, part of that awakening was not simply a new set of thoughts or beliefs. It was an emergence of signals I had not fully trusted before. Emotional signals, somatic signals, sensations that had been there, but had often been pushed beneath cognitive explanation. The default was to explain everything through the mind, to analyze, rationalize, justify, interpret, and make it fit some kind of logical frame. But the pain I felt was not only a psychological idea, it was a loss of signal, or maybe more accurately, it was the pain of being disconnected from signals that were still trying to speak. There was an incongruence in my own actions and behaviors. Parts of me were being driven subconsciously, while another part was trying to explain everything afterwards. I could sense when something did not align, but I did not always have the conscious understanding of it at the time. I could notice things in the presence of others without fully knowing what I was noticing. The nervous system perceived something before the cognitive mind could organize it. And because I did not always have a framework for that, some of the explanations I reached for could probably be perceived as irrational from the outside. But that is part of the point. Some experiences are irrational if we expect them to be understood through the brain alone. They do not arrive first as clean logic. They arrive as sensation, atmosphere, emotional charge, bodily knowing, contradiction, discomfort, ache, expansion, contraction, or a feeling of mismatch. They are not irrational because they are meaningless. They are irrational because they are not yet translated into the language of rational thought. Not everything real begins as a rational explanation. Some truths begin as pressure in the chest. Some begin as a heaviness that will not go away. Some begin as a sudden recognition that the life being lived does not match the deeper self. Some begin as the body saying no before the mouth has permission to say it. Some begin as the nervous system refuses to keep pretending that an old pattern is acceptable. Some begin as pain. Pain in this sense is not only suffering, it can be a signal. It can be the system saying something is misaligned. Something is being suppressed. Something is being performed. Something has been disconnected. Something in the self wants to return to awareness. That was part of the awakening for me, not escaping the body, but returning to it. Not leaving reason behind, but realizing that reason without bodily signal becomes incomplete. There were sensations and emotional movements I had not fully used as guidance because the mind had been trained to take authority. The mind wanted to explain. The body wanted to reveal. And the work became learning how to let them speak to each other without one dismissing the other. This is where timing matters. A signal at one intensity can create one state. The same signal at another intensity can create something completely different. A small amount of activation can bring alertness, focus, and motivation. Too much can become anxiety, urgency, agitation, or threat. A little emotional charge can help us recognize importance. Too much can flood the system. A small dose of novelty can energize attention. Too much novelty can fragment it. A rhythm can soothe when it is coherent, but overwhelm when it becomes too fast, too loud, or too irregular. The nervous system depends on timing. It depends on rhythm. It depends on coordination. Communication in the brain is not only about content. It is about when signals arrive, how strongly they arrive, how long they last, how often they repeat, and whether the system has enough capacity to integrate them. The same words spoken slowly may regulate. Spoken sharply, they may activate defense. The same information received after rest may feel manageable. Received during exhaustion, it may feel catastrophic. The same memory may be tolerable in one state and unbearable in another. This is why timing is part of meaning. In human communication, timing changes everything. A pause can feel spacious or punishing. Silence can feel peaceful or threatening. A message can feel supportive or intrusive depending on when it arrives. A conversation can heal if the system has capacity, or escalate if the timing is wrong. The content may be identical, but the signal field is different. This also applies internally. A thought that appears during calm may be examined. The same thought during stress may become a spiral. A bodily sensation during safety may be curiosity. The same sensation during threat may become panic. A memory that arises gently may integrate. The same memory arriving too quickly may overwhelm. So when we speak about the electrical language of life, we are also speaking about rhythm. Signal without rhythm becomes noise. Information without timing becomes overload. Sensation without integration becomes confusion. Emotion without space becomes flooding. Logic without body becomes abstraction. The system needs coordination. This is where modern life becomes disruptive. Many people are not only struggling with thoughts, they are struggling with disrupted timing. Notifications break attention. Screens alter light cycles. Rapid content switching trains the nervous system towards constant interruption. News cycles create emotional spikes. Social media compresses outrage, humor, grief, desire, comparison, fear, and novelty into a single feed. The body is asked to respond to too many signals without enough recovery or integration. The system becomes noisy, and once the signal environment becomes noisy, the story changes. A person may begin saying, I am anxious, I am scattered, I am unmotivated, I am angry, I am broken, or I cannot focus, when part of what is happening is that the system has been pulled out of rhythm. The body is trying to process too much. The brain is trying to coordinate too many inputs. Attention is being repeatedly fractured. The nervous system is not being given enough coherent space to settle. Again, this does not mean every problem is caused by technology or stress, but it does mean that we need to stop treating internal states as if they appear in isolation. The brain is not sealed off from the world. This is the third hidden layer. Chemical language is relational. Neurochemistry is influenced by sleep, stress, food, movement, light, social connection, language, screens, and environment. The brain does not sit inside the skull untouched by life. It is in constant conversation with the body and world. What you eat, how you sleep, how you breathe, who you spend time with, what language you hear, what rhythms you live by, what light enters your eyes, what stress your body carries, what sounds surround you, and what stories you repeatedly absorb all participate in the signal environment. This is why inner work cannot be separated from outer conditions. We can develop awareness, reflection, meditation, discernment, and emotional literacy. But if the surrounding signal environment is constantly dysregulating the body, the work becomes harder. A person cannot always think their way out of signal disruption. Sometimes the system needs rhythm, rest, nourishment, movement, silence, sunlight, safe connection, or reduced input. This is also why each human experience is unique. We can align ideologically to some extent. We do this through culture, language, shared belief, shared stories, shared symbols, and shared values. We can agree on concepts. We can stand under the same flag, doctrine, worldview, philosophy, religion, science, political identity, or community. We can repeat the same words. We can even share similar experiences on the surface. But none of us can fully share what it feels like to be another person from the inside. We cannot fully share how it feels to feel the sun on our face on a cold morning as that exact body, with that exact history, in that exact state, with that exact nervous system, memory, chemistry, and meaning. We can both say, the sun feels warm. We can both understand the sentence. But the lived signal is private. It is embodied. It is uniquely ours. That is what makes each of us irreducible. No one else can completely inhabit your signal field. No one else can feel your exact combination of memory, skin, breath, sunlight, ache, longing, grief, relief, and recognition. No one else can know precisely what a certain tone does in your body, because they do not have your history with that tone. No one else can fully feel how a word lands in your nervous system, because they do not carry the same associations. No one else can occupy the exact internal weather from which your perception emerges. This does not isolate us, it humbles us. It means that communication is always translation. It means language is always an attempt to carry an inner signal into a shared world. It means misunderstanding is not always failure. Sometimes it is the difficulty of translating embodied experience into words that another system can receive. It means we should be careful when dismissing what another person says they feel, simply because it does not fit our own internal reality. This also explains why some awakening experiences are difficult to communicate. When something shifts at the level of signal, when emotional and bodily information comes online in a new way, when sensations that were previously ignored become meaningful, the mind may struggle to explain what has happened. It may reach for spiritual language, symbolic language, poetic language, philosophical language, or theories that sound strange to others. But underneath the language, something real may be occurring. The system is reorganizing its relationship to signal. The danger is not in using spiritual or symbolic language. The danger is when we mistake our explanation for the signal itself. The explanation is an attempt. It may be incomplete. It may be clumsy. It may be shaped by culture, available vocabulary, previous beliefs, or emotional need. But the signal underneath may still deserve attention. This is why I would not dismiss my own earlier explanations, even if some now appear less precise. They were attempts to explain something that was first felt, sensed, and perceived through the body. The language may evolve. The frameworks may become clearer. The understanding may mature. But the original signal was not meaningless just because the first explanation was imperfect. That is an important distinction. A story can be inaccurate while the signal is real. A belief can be incomplete while the sensation points towards something important. An explanation can sound irrational while the body is registering a genuine incongruence. That is why the work is not to choose between body and brain, spirituality and reason, signal and story. The work is to integrate them, to let the body speak, but not let every sensation become doctrine. To let reason organize, but not let reason dismiss everything it cannot immediately explain. To let spiritual language open meaning, but not let it escape grounded observation. To let science sharpen the frame, but not let it flatten the mystery of being alive. This is where the electrical language of life becomes more than biology. It becomes a way of understanding consciousness as a lived signal. Not consciousness as an abstract idea, but consciousness as the ability to notice what is moving through the system before it becomes automatic, a story. The ability to sense when the body has shifted. The ability to ask what changed before the thought appeared. The ability to recognize when perception has altered because the internal environment has changed. The ability to notice when a signal belongs to now and when it may belong to memory, overload, anticipation, or old defense. This kind of awareness creates space. Instead of immediately believing the story, we can ask, what signal preceded it? Did the mood change first? Did the body tighten first? Did the environment shift first? Did I absorb someone else's state? Did a word, image, rhythm, or memory activate something before I understood it? Did the signal become a story because the mind needed explanation? This does not make us less human. It makes us more intimate with the process of being human. Because the body may shift before the mind explains it. Mood may change before a clear thought appears. Perception may alter because the internal signal environment has changed. The same signal at a different intensity or rhythm can produce a different state. Communication in the brain depends on coordination, not just content. Neurochemistry is influenced by sleep, stress, food, movement, light, social connection, language, screens, and environment. The brain is not sealed off from the world. That brings us back to the key insight. The story you tell may begin after the signal has already changed. So before believing the story completely, learn to listen beneath it, not to reject the mind, but to hear the life that was speaking before the mind began to explain. Part 4. The expansion field, timing, rhythm, and the modern signal environment. Once we understand that the brain speaks through electricity, chemistry, rhythm, and state, the next question becomes, what kind of rhythm is the modern nervous system living inside? Because regulation is not just calm. Regulation is coherent signal timing. The nervous system depends on rhythm, sleep and waking, breath and pause, heartbeat and recovery, speech and silence, attention and rest, movement and stillness, social timing and relational repair. The body is not designed to live as a permanently switched-on machine. It is designed to move through cycles, activation and settling, effort and recovery, focus and release, stimulation and integration. When those rhythms are coherent, the system has more capacity. Thought becomes clearer, perception becomes wider, emotion becomes easier to hold. The body does not have to treat every input as urgent. There is enough timing in the system for signals to arrive, be processed, and settle again. But when timing is disrupted, the system begins to feel different. A poor night's sleep not only makes you tired, it changes the signal field. Breathing may become shallower, attention may become fragile, emotional tolerance may drop, irritation may rise faster, memory may become less reliable. The same conversation that would have felt manageable yesterday may feel invasive today. The same task may feel heavier. The same uncertainty may feel like a threat. This is signal timing. The same applies to breath. A rushed breath tells the system something different from a slow, steady breath. The body listens to its own rhythm. A shallow, fast rhythm may support alertness, urgency, defense, or anxiety. A slower rhythm may allow more space, more orientation, and more capacity to pause before reacting. Breath is not just oxygen, it is information. Speech rhythm matters too. A fast, pressured voice can create urgency, even if the words are harmless. A sharp tone can tighten the listener before the meaning is fully processed. A calm rhythm can create enough safety for difficult content to be received. This is why language is never just content. It is timing, tone, pace, pressure, pause, implication, and state. This ties directly to MLH and nervous system language. Language is not simply symbolic, it is nervous system signaling. A phrase does not only mean something, it does something. It can soften, tighten, provoke, settle, shame, invite, overload, or regulate. The word is carried by rhythm, and the rhythm enters the body. Stress disrupts this timing. Under stress, the system shifts into urgency. Attention narrows. Memory becomes more state-dependent. Perception becomes more threat-sensitive. Decision-making becomes more reactive. The body begins prioritizing survival-relevant signals over wider interpretation. This can be useful in immediate danger, but chronic stress turns the entire interface noisy. A chronically stressed system can feel as if life itself is too loud. Small tasks feel demanding. Small delays feel irritating. Neutral expressions feel suspicious. Silence feels loaded. Rest feels difficult. The body is not only responding to what is happening now, it is responding from a background signal environment already set to urgency. That is one reason chronic stress can make people feel constantly behind, constantly braced, constantly scanning, or constantly needing to solve something. Even when nothing dramatic is happening, the system has lost rhythm. It has become noisy. And then technology enters this signal field. Notifications interrupt timing. Scrolling trains the nervous system towards seeking. Blue light can interfere with sleep-wake cues. Rapid content switching fragments attention. Algorithmic intensity delivers emotional spikes without integration. The feed gives the system novelty, outrage, humor, fear, comparison, desire, grief, and distraction in rapid succession. The body may be still, but the nervous system is being moved from state to state. Digital life trains the brain towards interruption. This matters because attention needs rhythm too. Deep attention requires time to gather. It needs continuity. It needs the ability to stay with something long enough for meaning to deepen. But if the brain is constantly trained by alerts, clips, tabs, feeds, and fast emotional shifts, attention becomes fragmented. The mind begins expecting interruption. Stillness starts to feel strange. Depth begins to feel effortful. The nervous system becomes less rhythmic and more reactive. This is not about saying technology is evil. It is about recognizing that technology is not neutral at the level of the signal. A device not only delivers content, it trains timing, it shapes expectation, it teaches the body what pace reality should move at, it makes interruptions feel normal, it makes novelty feel necessary, it makes the ordinary rhythm feel too slow. The modern signal environment is not just the events of life. It is the artificial rhythm wrapped around life. Feeds, alerts, media cycles, emotional spikes, constant novelty, breaking news, social metrics, message bubbles, scrolling loops, and algorithmic repetition. The body is responding to all of it, and because it becomes normal, many people do not recognize the saturation. They just feel foggy, agitated, restless, numb, impatient, reactive, or tired. They may think, this is just me. But often the system is trying to operate with too much signal and too little integration. The interface becomes saturated. This is where the resonance matrix work connects strongly. Rhythm, timing, tone, and state are not decorative. They are part of how influence works. A repeated phrase, a charged image, a fast-cut video, a dramatic soundtrack, a headline delivered at the wrong moment, a voice with pressure behind it. These are not just messages. They are signal events. They shape the nervous system before conscious thought has fully entered. This is also where the consciousness code comes in. Awareness is signal recognition before automatic behavior. It is the ability to notice that the body has shifted before the story hardens. It is the moment where you realize, my attention has fragmented, my breath has changed, my chest has tightened. This rhythm is pulling me into urgency. This feed is altering my state. This conversation is moving faster than my system can integrate. That recognition is powerful. Because once you recognize signal disruption, you do not have to immediately become the story it produces. You can adjust the rhythm before arguing with thought. You can step away from the screen. You can breathe. You can move. You can reduce input. You can return to silence. You can slow down your speech. You can change the light. You can sleep. You can ask whether your reaction belongs to the present moment or to a saturated signal field. This is not escapism. It is the maintenance of the interface. If the nervous system depends on timing, then rhythm becomes a form of care. Sleep is not laziness. Breath is not trivial. Silence is not empty. Movement is not separate from thought. Slowness is not failure. Recovery is not weakness. These are ways the signal system restores coherence. So the expansion field here is simple, but deep. The modern human being is not only dealing with thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. We are dealing with signal conditions. And those signal conditions are increasingly artificial, fragmented, accelerated, and emotionally charged. To become conscious in this environment is to become sensitive to timing again. To notice what pace you are living at. To notice what rhythm is shaping your perception. To notice when your system is no longer responding to life, but to interruption. Because regulation is not just calm. It is the return of coherent signal timing. Part 5 field case, the overstimulated morning. A clear example of signal disruption is the overstimulated morning. Imagine someone wakes up already tired. Maybe they slept badly. Maybe they woke in the night. Maybe their body has not fully restored itself. Before they have even stood up, before they have had water, light, movement, breath, silence, or any real contact with the day, they reach for the phone. At first, it seems harmless. Just a quick check, one message, one notification, one update, one headline. But the nervous system does not only receive information, it receives a signal. A message may carry a demand. A notification may carry urgency. A headline may carry a threat. A social media post may trigger comparison. An email may activate pressure. A comment may create irritation. A news story may introduce fear. A video may pull the body into outrage, amusement, sadness, disbelief, or curiosity within seconds. Nothing major has happened in the person's life yet. They are still in bed. The room is the same. The morning is still available. But internally, the signal environment has already changed. The system was disrupted before the story of the day had even begun. This is what makes the overstimulated morning so important. It shows how a person can begin the day in reaction before intention. The body has not chosen a rhythm. It has been pulled into one. Instead of waking into breath, orientation, movement, and gradual awareness, the nervous system enters fragmentation. Messages, alerts, novelty, comparison, responsibility, threat, humor, urgency, and emotional spikes all arriving together. The brain begins switching context before it has stabilized. One moment it is reading a message from someone close. Next, a headline about a crisis. Next, an advert. Next, a video. Next, someone else's success. Next, conflict in the comments. Next, a reminder of something unfinished. Each input may be small, but together they create a field. Attention becomes scattered. The body becomes slightly activated. Perception of the day shifts. The shift can be subtle. The person may not notice the cause. They may simply feel uneasy, irritated, tired, behind, distracted, or low. Then the mind builds a story around that state. I don't feel right today. I've got too much to do. People are annoying. Everything feels heavy. I can't focus. I'm already stressed. Some of that may be true. But the story has arrived after the signal changed. This is where the modern interface becomes so vulnerable. The first signals of the day can set the nervous system's expectation. If the first rhythm is urgency, the body may carry urgency forward. If the first input is comparison, the mind may begin the day from a lack. If the first contact is conflict, the body may begin scanning for a threat. If the first experience is rapid scrolling, attention may start fragmented before deep work has even begun. The day has not gone wrong. The signal has been altered. This is why the phone is not just a tool in this example. It is a rhythm generator. It decides pace before the person does. It decides what emotions enter the body before the person has grounded themselves. It exposes the nervous system to other people's demands, fears, opinions, images, highlights, grief, anger, performance, and urgency before the self has properly returned to itself. That is a profound thing when you slow it down. The person may believe they are only checking something, but the system is being trained. It is being trained to wake into interruption. It is being trained to seek before settling. It is being trained to respond before orienting. It is being trained to receive the world through a feed before receiving the body through direct sensation. This is not about demonizing the phone. The same device can connect, inform, support, organize, teach, and even regulate if used consciously. The issue is timing and signal. What enters first? What rhythm begins the day? Who or what gets access to the nervous system before the person has had access to themselves? That question matters. Because if the morning begins with signal disruption, the rest of the day may be interpreted through that disruption. A small delay feels more irritating. A task feels harder to begin. A message feels more demanding. A quiet moment feels uncomfortable because the system has already been accelerated. The body is awake, but not necessarily oriented. The mind is active, but not necessarily clear. This is how overstimulation can masquerade as personality. Someone says, "I'm just anxious in the morning," or "I'm not good at focusing," or "I'm always behind," without noticing the repeated signal pattern that begins the day. Again, there may be deeper causes, but the morning interface matters. The practice here is not perfection, it is an observation. What happens if the phone is not the first signal? What happens if the day begins with breath, water light, movement silence, a notebook, a short walk, or simply sitting for a moment before entering the digital field? What happens if the nervous system is allowed to find its own rhythm before it is pulled into someone else's? Even 10 minutes can reveal a difference. The point is not to create another rule or another self-improvement performance. The point is to notice that the signal environment shapes the story. If the day begins with fragmentation, the mind may later call itself scattered. If the day begins with a threat, the mind may later call the world heavy. If the day begins with comparison, the mind may later call the self inadequate. If the day begins with urgency, the body may spend the morning trying to catch up with a pace it never consciously chose. So the real-world field case is simple, but revealing. A person wakes tired, they check the phone immediately. Notifications, messages, news, social media, comparison and urgency enter the system. Dopamine-driven seeking, threat cues and fragmented attention begin shaping the nervous system. Nothing major happened, but the signal environment changed. Once the signal environment changed, the day began to feel different before the person had even decided what kind of day they wanted to have. Part 6. The cognitive shift. The cognitive shift in this episode is the movement from seeing mood as a personal mystery to seeing mood as the surface of a signal environment. The old frame says, "My mood is just how I feel." The new frame says, "My mood may be the conscious surface of a deeper signal environment." That shift matters because it changes the way we relate to our inner states. If mood is just how I feel, then the state can quickly become identity. I feel anxious, so I am anxious. I feel flat, so I am unmotivated. I feel irritated, so people are annoying. I feel foggy, so I am failing. I feel heavy, so life is heavy. The feeling becomes the explanation. The state becomes the self. But when we understand mood as the surface of a deeper signal environment, the field opens. The question becomes wider. What happened before this feeling arrived? What signals entered the system? What rhythm was interrupted? What chemistry shifted? What did the body receive before the mind began to explain it? This does not mean feelings are fake. It means feelings are meaningful. But meaning is not the same as the final truth. A feeling may tell us something has changed in the system. It may not yet tell us exactly what the change means. Feelings are not random. They often emerge from conditions. Sleep, food, movement, breath, stress, light, sound, language, social interaction, memory, screens, pressure, and environment all participate in the signal field. A mood is not floating in isolation. It is connected to a body, a nervous system, a history, a rhythm, and a moment. This is where self-awareness becomes more precise. Instead of immediately asking, "Why do I feel like this?" we might first ask, "What is my system signaling?" That question moves us beneath the story and back into the living interface. Maybe the system is signaling exhaustion. Maybe it is signaling overstimulation. Maybe it is signaling hunger, grief, threat, loneliness, pressure, comparison, lack of rhythm, or too much input. Maybe the emotion is not a problem to fix, but a message that the internal environment has become disrupted. Attention is not isolated either. We often treat attention like a moral skill, as though focus is simply a matter of discipline. But attention is deeply shaped by signal conditions. A rested body attends differently from an exhausted one. A regulated nervous system attends differently from a threatened one. A mind trained all morning by notifications and rapid switching will not always drop easily into deep focus. It has been paced differently. It has been rhythmically conditioned towards interruption. So when attention fragments, the question is not only, "Why can't I concentrate?" The question is, what rhythm has my attention been living inside? Has it been given continuity or only interruption? Has it been trained by depth or by novelty? Has it had silence or only noise? Has the system been allowed to settle, or has it been constantly pulled into the next input? Perception is shaped by signal conditions as well. A stressed system sees things differently. A tired system interprets differently. An overstimulated system reacts differently. A connected system receives differently. Under pressure, ambiguity may become a threat. Under exhaustion, difficulty may become failure. In comparison, another person's success may become evidence of personal inadequacy. Under calm, the same information may feel workable, neutral, or even inspiring. The world did not always change. The signal environment changed. That is the reframe. Regulation begins with recognizing signal disruption, not forcing yourself to be calm, not shaming yourself for reacting, not pretending the state is not there, but noticing something has shifted in the system. Something has altered the rhythm, chemistry, timing, or internal noise level. Before I believe the whole story this state is telling me, I need to understand the signal conditions beneath it. This is especially important in modern life because many disruptions are subtle and cumulative. One notification may not matter. One headline may not matter, one poor night's sleep may not matter, one tense interaction may not matter, but together they create a signal field. The body absorbs them. Attention adapts to them. The nervous system begins carrying them. Then the mind wakes up inside the state and calls it reality. That is why the question changes from what am I thinking to what is my system signaling. Both questions matter, but they point to different levels. What am I thinking helps us observe the story. What is my system signaling helps us observe the conditions from which the story is emerging. If I think I can't cope, I can examine the thought. But I can also ask, is my system signaling overload? Have I had a recovery? Am I carrying too much unresolved input? Is my body tired? Is my attention saturated? Have I eaten? Have I moved? Have I been exposed to threat cues all morning? If I think everyone is irritating, I can ask whether people are truly the issue or whether my signal field is already activated. If I think I am behind, I can ask whether urgency was introduced before I chose it. If I think I feel disconnected, I can ask whether my system is signaling loneliness, fatigue, overstimulation, or emotional shutdown. This is not about explaining everything away. Sometimes the story is accurate. Sometimes there really is too much to carry. Sometimes a relationship is strained. Sometimes the environment is unhealthy. Sometimes action is needed. But signal awareness prevents us from collapsing everything into identity too quickly. It creates a gap. In that gap, regulation becomes possible. Because once I realize my mood may be the conscious surface of a deeper signal environment, I can respond differently. I may not need to argue with the thought first. I may need water, food, rest, movement, sunlight, silence, slower breathing, reduced screen input, a different conversation, or a pause from urgency. I may need to restore rhythm before I can understand the story clearly. This is where awareness becomes practical. It is not only about insight, it is about reading the interface. The body is signaling, attention is signaling, mood is signaling, perception is signaling. The question is whether we can listen before the story becomes absolute. So the cognitive shift is this. My mood is not just how I feel. It may be the surface expression of a deeper signal environment. Feelings are not random. Attention is not isolated. Perception is shaped by signal conditions. Regulation begins when I recognize disruption before I become the story that disruption produces. And once I can ask, what is my system signaling? I stop treating every mood as identity, every reaction as truth, and every thought as the whole picture. I begin listening to the language underneath. Part 7. The somatic layer. The somatic layer is where signal disruption becomes personal. It is where the idea stops being abstract and begins showing up in the body as restlessness, fatigue, tightness, irritability, foggy thinking, difficulty settling, wired but tired states, and overreactions to small inputs. The body often is disrupted before the mind knows what is wrong. That is the key insight here. Before the mind has built a clear explanation, the body may already be showing the disturbance. You may feel unable to sit still. You may feel tired but unable to rest. You may feel tension in the jaw, shoulders, stomach, or chest. You may feel irritated by small things that would not usually affect you. You may feel mentally foggy but emotionally alert. You may feel as if your system is switched on but not clear, active but not focused, awake but not restored. That is the wired but tired state, and many people are living there more often than they realize. Wired but tired is what happens when the system is activated but not nourished. There is energy, but it is not grounded energy. There is alertness, but it is not clarity. There is movement, but it is not direction. The body is being kept in a state of readiness, but the deeper rhythms of recovery, integration, and calm attention are not being restored. In that state, the mind may start creating stories. I'm lazy. I'm anxious. I can't focus. I'm overwhelmed. Something is wrong with me. But underneath the story, the system may simply be overloaded, underrested, overstimulated, undernourished, emotionally saturated, or rhythmically disrupted. This is why somatic awareness matters. The body gives early signs. It tells us when the signal field is becoming too loud. Restlessness may be one sign. You sit down to focus, but your body keeps reaching for something. A phone, a tab, a snack, a distraction, a task that is easier than the one that matters. The mind may call this procrastination, and sometimes it is. But at the signal level, restlessness may show that the system is struggling to settle into one rhythm. It has been trained by switching, novelty, and interruption, so stillness feels uncomfortable. Fatigue is another sign. But fatigue is not always simple tiredness. Sometimes it is the fatigue of constant microactivation. The body has been bracing all day, responding to small demands, notifications, noise, emotional labor, uncertainty, and unfinished loops. Nothing dramatic happened, but the system has been spending energy in the background. By the end of the day, the mind may wonder why it feels so drained. The body knows. Tightness can show the same thing. The jaw holds. The shoulders rise. The stomach contracts. The chest feels compressed. The breath becomes shallower. These are not random physical sensations. They are signals. They may show that the system is preparing, defending, anticipating, or carrying pressure that has not yet been consciously named. Irritability is also often a sign of signal disruption. When the system has little capacity left, small inputs feel too big, a noise feels sharper, a request feels like pressure, a delay feels intolerable, a comment feels personal. The person may think the world has become more annoying, but often the threshold has lowered. The system has less room to absorb incoming signals without reacting. Foggy thinking can appear when the system is overloaded or underregulated. The mind cannot organize clearly. Thoughts feel slow, scattered, or incomplete. Words may be harder to access. Decision-making becomes heavier. The person may try to force clarity through effort, but sometimes the issue is not a lack of effort. It is signal noise. The system needs coherence before the mind can think clearly. Difficulty settling is another modern symptom. A person may have free time but not feel free. They may sit down to rest and immediately reach for stimulation. Silence may feel empty. Stillness may feel agitating. The nervous system has become accustomed to input, so the absence of input feels strange. The body does not know how to downshift because it has spent too long in acceleration. Then there is an overreaction to small inputs. A message, a tone, a noise, a change of plan, a minor criticism, a slow response, a technical problem, a headline, a look from someone else. These things may not be major in themselves, but when the system is disrupted, they land harder. The response is not only about the input, it is about the state of the receiver. This is one of the most important points in the somatic layer. The size of the reaction is not always determined by the size of the event. It is often determined by the capacity of the system receiving it. A regulated system has rhythm. It has flexibility. It can respond, recover, adjust, and return. It can receive a small stressor without turning it into a full-body emergency. It can pause before reacting. It can notice discomfort without becoming the discomfort. It has enough internal coherence that the world does not immediately pull it apart. A disrupted system feels different. It is noisy, it is urgent, it is fragmented. It reacts impulsively because the signal field is already unstable. It does not have much margin. Everything arrives in a crowded room. And because there is already too much happening internally, the next small thing may feel like the final thing. This is why regulation is not simply calmness. It is capacity. It is rhythm. It is the body's ability to move through activation and return. It is the difference between receiving a signal and being overtaken by it. When the system is regulated, perception tends to become clearer. Not perfect, but clearer. There is enough space to include context, enough rhythm to wait, enough grounding to ask whether the first reaction is the whole truth. Attention can settle, thought can organize, emotion can be felt without becoming the entire field. When the system is disrupted, perception narrows. The body looks for urgency, the mind looks for an explanation. The story hardens quickly. The person may react before they understand what they are reacting to. This is where the body becomes a guide. It may be known before the mind. It may say, the signal is too loud, the rhythm is off. There has been too much input, you need recovery. You need movement, you need silence, you need food, you need sleep, you need to step away. You need to slow the pace before you believe the story. But many of us have been trained to ignore these signals until they become severe. We push through tightness, we normalize fatigue. We call restlessness a personality. We call irritability honesty. We call fog laziness. We call overstimulation modern life. We wait until the body shouts because we did not listen when it whispered. The practice is to begin earlier. Notice the first signs of signal disruption. Notice when the breath changes. Notice when the body becomes slightly braced. Notice when attention begins jumping. Notice when irritability rises. Notice when you feel the urge to scroll, snack, argue, escape, or control. These are not just behaviors. They may be attempts to regulate a disrupted signal environment. Once you notice them, you can respond at the level of signal rather than story. You may not need to solve your whole life in that moment. You may need to reduce input, drink water, step outside, move the body, breathe more slowly, pause before replying, turn the screen away, eat something stabilizing, sit in silence, listen to music that steadies rather than spikes, return to one task, let the system gather itself. Small signal changes can create large changes in the story. That is not a weakness. It is biological literacy. You are not only a mind trying to think better, you are a body-brain system trying to regain coherence. And the more you learn to recognize the somatic signs of disruption, the less likely you are to mistake noise for truth, urgency for importance, or fragmentation for identity. Part 8 Observation Practice today. Don't just notice what you think. Notice the signal environment around you. That is the practice. Choose one period of the day where your state changes. It may be a shift into irritation, fog, anxiety, restlessness, tiredness, urgency, or even calm. Instead of immediately asking, why am I thinking this? Ask what changed before the thought appeared. Look backwards gently. Did you sleep badly? Did you check your phone first thing? Did you scroll for longer than intended? Did you eat or skip food? Did a conversation create tension? Did a headline alter your state? Did music lift you or intensify something? Did silence settle you or make you uncomfortable? Did the movement clear your mind? Did lighting, noise, pace, or social media shift your attention? The prompt is simple. What signal changed before my story changed? Maybe the story was I can't focus, but the signal was rapid screen switching. Maybe the story was I'm anxious, but the signal was caffeine, poor sleep, and unresolved pressure. Maybe the story was everything feels heavy, but the signal was news, comparison, and lack of movement. Maybe the story was I feel clearer, and the signal was sunlight, breath, music, silence, or a slower pace. For the optional layer, remove or alter one signal input for 30 minutes. Put the phone away, change the lighting, step outside, drink water, move your body, sit in silence, play music that steadies rather than spikes, avoid the news for a short window, slow your speech, do one thing without interruption. Then notice what changes. Not to force yourself into calm, but to observe the interface. Sometimes the mind does not produce a problem. Sometimes the system is signaling a disruption. And once you recognize the signal before the story, you can begin responding at the level where the change actually began. So as we bring episode 6 towards a close, the central point is this. Before the story arrives, the system is already speaking. Before the thought becomes clear, the body may have shifted. Before the mood has a name, the signal environment may have changed. Before the reaction becomes behavior, electricity, chemistry, rhythm, breath, timing, sensation, and state may already be shaping the field. This episode has been about learning to listen beneath the surface, not reducing the human being to biology, but recognizing that the mind is not separate from the signal. Sleep, stress, food, movement, language, light, screens, social connection, silence, and rhythm all shape the conditions through which thought appears. A mood is not always just a mood. Sometimes it is the conscious surface of a disrupted signal environment. I think this matters because so much of modern life encourages us to believe every state must become a story. If we feel scattered, we make it about identity. If we feel anxious, we make it about the future. If we feel tired, we make it about failure. If we feel restless, we make it about needing more stimulation. But sometimes the system is simply telling us that the rhythm is off, the input is too high, the body needs rest, or the signal field has become saturated. This is where awareness becomes practical. Instead of fighting every thought at the surface, we can ask what changed underneath it. What signal shifted before the story changed? Was there an interruption, overstimulation, hunger, poor sleep, conflict, too much scrolling, too little movement, too much artificial urgency? The more we learn to ask these questions, the less we have to treat every feeling as a final reality. This leads us directly into episode 7. If the brain speaks through electrical and chemical signals, then the next question is, what happens when we reduce those signals into simple feel-good chemicals? Because dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins are not just pleasure buttons. They are not simple switches that make us happy, motivated, bonded, or relaxed in isolation. They are part of complex loops that can regulate us, motivate us, bond us, or trap us. In episode 7, we will explore the lie of feel-good chemicals. We will look at the oversimplified way these systems are often discussed, and how modern life can hijack motivation, reward, validation, craving, and emotional regulation through addiction loops, social media, sugar stimulation, and the constant search for the next hit. So episode 6 leaves us with this recognition. You are not only thoughts moving through a mind. You are electricity, chemistry, rhythm, breath, timing, sensation, and signal. And the more you learn to read the signal, the less you have to be ruled by the story that arrives afterwards. Listen beneath the thought, notice the rhythm of your system, and ask what your body was signaling before the story began. Until next time, thanks for joining me today. You've been listening to If the Brain Was an App, the Expanded Interface, Episode 6, The Electrical Language of Life. I'm James Miller.